We good? Good? All right. All right, well, I'm going to talk about, well, welcome to Explore. I hope everyone's having a good time, learning a lot, meeting people. I'm going to talk about business continuity and disaster recovery. This presentation started off with one scenario, but is now up to 3, unfortunately. So we're going to talk about disaster recovery, business continuity. My name's Eric Kubla. I'm an IT server manager at a regional bank based out of central Pennsylvania. We've got about 130 branches from Philly to Cincinnati. I've been a VMUG leader in Pittsburgh for 10 plus years. 2 years as a VMUG US East regional champ. I think 10 years now as a V-expert and a VMUG community speaker. Over the last 2 years, I've been to, I think, 14 VMUG UserCons. So we have VMUG members in here? All right, about half. See them over there. We'll get the rest of you signed up. Please take your survey at the end, and we'll get started. So why did First Commonwealth start using Veeam? And this isn't a Veeam presentation, don't worry, that's just what we use. Why do we start using Veeam and overhaul our DR plan / scenario? So back in 2020 or 2014, we went through a core conversion. Part of that core conversion was getting rid of a lot of old ancillary apps, a lot of physical servers. We were in the midst of virtualizing everything, which we're now 100% virtual in our server environment. And we had the need for a DR scenario. It wasn't part of the plan. And at the time, I'd been looking at Veeam. So with limited time to research other opportunities, we went with Veeam. We now use Veeam for our backup solution. We didn't initially. Veeam was only used to replicate our servers. But now we're replication and backup with Veeam. As time went on, we started with only about 30 servers in our replication because it was purchased just for our core conversion, just for that DR scenario. Now every one of our production and UAT servers is being replicated and backed up through Veeam. So it solved the problem that we had really quick. Again, this isn't a Veeam presentation. I only mention it because I use it. I know there's a lot of other good products out there that all do the same thing, some better than others. But it helped with the replication because we're now no longer patching a physical server here and a physical server there. You're not updating OSs in 2 places. You don't have to worry if you updated the application on your DR server when you did it in prod. Everything synced up with that replication. It made our lives easier, and it made sure that what is running here is going to be available there. And so what happened to us? As I mentioned, this started out as a one-time thing in 2022. Unfortunately, 2 other incidents occurred since then. And the initial one was on a Friday in March of 2022. We got a call at 8:30 a.m. that our data center was about to lose power. And we had 20 minutes. 20 minutes would have been great. We had about 10. So they were doing routine maintenance on our UPS. I don't know what the piece of the UPS failed during that routine maintenance, but power got stuck on the UPS. Couldn't switch back to house power, couldn't switch to the generator. So, it's a matter of time before we go dark. And I called my team and said, listen, don't ask any questions. Start powering off all our production VMs. And good or bad, they listened to me. I'm not sure if that was the right move or not, but they did. So we wanted to preserve, prevent any corruption of Exchange or databases. So we shut down what we could, started failing over through Veeam what we could. But with only 10 minutes, I mean, as good as Veeam works, as much as I like it, 10 minutes was not enough time. So we got everything powered off, failed over what we could, and then a little bit of time to explain to them what happened. And then we start bringing up our applications in our DR location. We also had to deal with an I-series. So does anybody familiar with an I-series use one? They don't fail over in 10 minutes, right? They take a little bit longer. When things go right, they take about an hour. So a lot of our core banking applications rely on the I-Series. So my team, we don't support the I-Series. Thank God we didn't have to deal with that. But we still get the questions, right? When's my app going to be up? When's my app going to be up? And that'll come later with the business continuity team and how they helped us handle the situation. But so some of the things we learned from that was what can we improve? And Cisco OTV was one of the things we put in place about a year before this happened. And if you don't know, Cisco OTV is, and I have to write it down because I never remember it, but overlay transport virtualization. And it allows you to extend layer 2 to 2 different data centers. And how that helped was in the past, before that, when we were doing DR tests, is you fell over an application and something doesn't work. Well, that's because a port wasn't set up on the firewall correctly, because you're running 1010 here, 192 here. So you got an issue. So it delays the DR testing. OTV allowed us to extend that layer 2 and run 1010 in both locations, means the IP doesn't change. You don't have to deal with firewall. It makes everybody's life easier and allows applications to come up quicker. The documentation. So we're always looking to improve our documentation. And every year we do DR tests on a lot of our applications, not all. And we've never done we did for this. Prior to that, we've never done a full DR test where you completely fell everything over all at once. Everything was always a planned. We planned our core application DR test for about 3 months prior to doing it. So everything normally goes smooth, right? When you plan to test the DR, everything goes as planned most of the time because you spend so much time. Well, in a true DR scenario, you don't have that time to plan it, right? But during our tests of our applications, we document what we do. And every year, something changes. We update our documentation. We rotate that documentation between the team so that everybody does something different every year. Essentially, if it's down to one person, they should be able to take all the documentation, fill over all those applications, and everything goes smooth. Of course, it doesn't always, but you know, like to think so. But that's why we always test it annually, and we always document it. And knowing what's in your data centers. So during this initial DR incident that we had, I mean, everybody knows what's in their data centers, right? But things we found out was our storage, our file server. We knew it was replicated, but we never tested it, right? So, we'll just fill it over and it'll work. Well, it didn't work. And we had to call the vendor. They had to help us out. We documented what we did, and now it's part of our DR test. But that's something we knew that was there, but was never part of our plan. Virtual desktops. We knew we had them. We didn't replicate them. Why would you replicate a virtual desktop? Well, there's a lot of our staff, my team, our database team, our support desk, our InfoSec team, they all use virtual desktops as their primary device because we have a lot of remote workers, and it's just easier than VPN and dealing with that. We'll just use VPN in, use a virtual desktop. It's in the data center. It's quicker. Well, we weren't replicating those. So now we have, your core IT staff, a lot of them without a virtual machine to work with. So we knew they were there. We just never thought that should be part of our DR plan. And since then, we've added them into Veeam. We now replicate 15 to 20% of our virtual desktops. We only have maybe 200. So it's not a big workload, but it's important, right? So when this goes down, we need our support desk. We need our InfoSec team up and running before we get our back office users, because who are they calling for support? The support desk, the level 2 team, the InfoSec team for, whatever reason. They're panicking. So prod versus DR. Where do your applications run? So we have 2 data centers. We referred to them as prod and DR. After this incident, we referred to them as primary and secondary because we knew that our secondary location had better power, better UPSs, and better generators. So the plan was, let's move everything there. you don't do that overnight. So knowing and documenting, again, what production applications are running here and what production ones are running here. And we had to change Veeam jobs, right? You still want to replicate, and we would cross-replicate depending on what was running where. And can both sites support a full workload? When we were in DR, when we were all physical, the answer to that was probably no. When we went virtual, we used our infrastructure. We went with UCS, and we bought it apples to apples, right? If we bought 4 hosts when we started out here, we had 4 hosts here. If we added 2 hosts here, we added 2 hosts here. The idea was that we could always run our full workload out of either data center. If we had 20 terabytes of storage here, we had 20 terabytes here. You're probably not using it, but it's there, because when we fell over, if you only have half the storage, chances are you can't power everything up. Even our UAT systems, our test systems, there are certain departments within the corporation that use UAT like production because they're always testing new releases of things. So their day-to-day tasks might involve our test servers. So while they're not critical to the business to serve our clients, they are critical to some people's daily working or workflow. And one thing I wanted to mention about our outage, it happened at 8:30 in the morning. Like I said, we're a bank. Our branch is open at 9 a.m. We had very limited customer impact. The team as a whole did a great job getting everything back up and running. We opened on time. Do we have any bank people that work for a bank in here? Okay, you don't count. It's Chris, he's on my team, so he doesn't count. So the application we use for our tellers, they do have a system that runs in offline mode. So when you walk into one of our branches and our I-Series is down, they can still help you with whatever banking needs you have. It stays there locally until it's back up and able to transfer back home to the servers, to the I-Series. So, we did a great job on limiting customer impact. And the timing with 8:30 in the morning was also really beneficial because our nightly processing finished. And this goes back, and sorry, I skipped through a few things. I tried to make this shorter with only 25 minutes, but one of the things we did with our lessons learned and what we improved was, do we have any Veeam users in here? All right, quite a few, good. You still don't count. So we were only doing replication once a day. And which means, if we had, when with all those servers we failed over at 8:30 in the morning, their last replication might have been from 8 p.m., midnight, 2 a.m. the night before, right? So there's a chance we lost, lost is the wrong word. We're temporarily missing data because during this outage, we lost no data, thank God. But since then, we upgraded Veeam and we went with CDP, continuous data protection, which allows you to lower that RPO, and you can get pretty low. I mean, depending on the size of the database, you're not going to get under a minute. But I think even our largest database, we're doing an RPO at under 10 minutes. So that was one of the things we learned out of this, and that we improved was increasing our RPO time. So back to this. So can you live without something? Yes, you could probably live without some virtual desktops, some UAT systems, but for the ease of setting this up, why even worry about that? Why, just figure out what comes up when and deal with the lesser important stuff later. But we replicate everything. UAT, it doesn't matter. So there are some things you could probably live without, even if it's for a short period of time, and know that, document it. Document what's important. So that comes to the business continuity. Who's on the team? Prior to this, I knew we had a business continuity team. I didn't know who was on it. I knew our CISO was on it, but I didn't know who else was, right? Every year I'd get a spreadsheet that listed every application, and it listed their priority and how important it was. And can anybody guess how important every application was to everybody else? Number one. Didn't matter what it was the most important. They didn't care if your domain controllers were up, if DNS was up, if Exchange was up. Their application needed to be up first, which, yes, by the way, we have domain controllers, DHCP, DNS running in 2 locations. That wasn't an issue. But those are things that people don't take into consideration, right? So on this list is, 200 applications that all need to be up in under 2 hours, which also is unrealistic. So something else this outage taught us is, yes, we're doing our best, but your application isn't going to be up in 2 hours. One, because it takes the I-series over an hour to be filled over. But knowing who's on that team and who manages it, that team really grew after that, right? And it became more prevalent who was on it from what business units. And that made a big difference, because for months after this, we had many calls with many people to discuss what happened and to educate them and understand their expectations, right? It's very important that those people know the process to fail things over, because during all of our DR tests, you had different people from different business units involved in these, right? We don't fail it over and test it. We fail it over, and then you log in and you test and make sure it's okay. But it's always the same person from that business unit, right? They don't rotate. Well, a business unit with 200 people, they don't understand that process because it may not have been communicated. So educating people on a wider scale as to the process needed to do a full DR failover is very important, because it lessens the calls, it lessens the panic when they understand, because and educating them on what we're actually doing in the background to get them working. And I think, then they respect your job a little bit more too. They understand that you're not sitting there, going to get lunch or playing video games, that you're working around the clock to get their application where it needs to be. And that's like the expectations versus reality. They all had these crazy expectations, but in reality, your application server might be up, but does it really matter if you can't connect to the I-series? Or does it really matter if you can't log onto your device? Or if VPN is down? They don't know everything that comes into play. They just know they come in every morning, log in, and everything works. So as I mentioned, that happened in 2022. And since then, we had 2 other ones. And every time we have a scenario, I feel that we get better with it. Like I would say on the first one, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd probably give us in a 7 range. And I know upper management was extremely happy with how everybody performed as a whole. But then more recently, our secondary location had a power issue, and we had to do this backwards, right? Everything that we moved to the secondary location now had to come back to the primary location. And again, that improved. It's never going to be perfect, because you don't want to go through these. But the panic level always comes down when you go through a scenario, again, because they've all been involved, they've all dealt with it, and they know the process works. Trust the process. Well, our process works because we test it annually and we document it. Do I have any CrowdStrike users in the crowd? You could raise your hand, it's okay. So that was our most recent one. And again, that's something completely out of your control, right? I mean, it was out of a lot of people's control. But, we were notified at 2 o'clock in the morning. And while our DR plan didn't necessarily come into play for this, our business continuity plan did. Our call tree, our reaction time, our response to certain situations. Fortunately, we were notified at 2:30 in the morning. Servers are back up by 4 a.m. We had people going into the branches by 6 a.m. to turn things on, see what's at a blue screen, see what's not. We kept our doors open all day, business as usual, 0 customer impact. You might have waited in line a little bit longer, but no impact to nightly processing. Friday night's nightly processing ran as planned, everything smooth. And I attribute a lot of that to our business continuity team and the plans that we put in place to get things done. There were peer banks that shut their doors that day. I don't know the names, so I can't say them if I wanted to, but I heard that they closed their doors because they just couldn't deal with it. I'm not saying they didn't have a DR or business continuity plan, but they didn't have something right, because, to close your doors is a big deal. Obviously, we're much smaller than Delta, not to pick on them, but they were kind of out of commission for a few days. So they also can't send, people out to different places to reboot a device and get it back online quickly, right? We're small enough, we have the ability to do that. So any questions or comments? I'm sorry, what'd you say about backups? So we just finished moving everything to Veeam for backups. We haven't turned on Immutable yet, but we do have a solution for that, another one. But our next step is to look into Immutable backups in Veeam and use that. So yes, we are looking into that. The other question for documentation, thank you, that's a good question, because for documentation, where was that stored? On our file server that didn't work, right? So what we used is we had an internal policy and procedures place where we kept these, but everything was stored on the file server. So that's great. We know it's there. We know it's backed up, but it doesn't come up because it wasn't tested. So since that, we changed that. We do have it stored in another location in the cloud. We do have hard copies. Some people keep hard copies. That's our plan too. Also, is to keep hard copies of it, because yeah, that's important. You get new people on the team, like this gentleman sitting here who has only been on the team with me for about 6 months. He hasn't gone through these DR tests. So if he had to do it, he's not going to know what to do without this documentation. So he's going to need that, which is why it's important to document it, have it accessible, not on your file server that's not turned on, and up to date so that it's ready to go if you have that issue. I don't know the name of it, to be honest with you, but it's neither one of those. But here's a chip for one of the McLaren shirts. If you guys, don't know where it's at, it's right over there. You go ahead and use that to get one.
So you mentioned databases
No. Oh, initially? Yes.
How did you manage to not?
Because we didn't start doing any processing for the day. So nightly that's at 8:30 a.m. was a good time. It was after night. Like if you're gonna have a data center outage, have it between when nightly processing finishes and before you start for the day. That's the ideal time. It was very fortunate on the time. Otherwise, yes, our database, and he's kind of the one that brought up the point of, boy, if this would have happened at 4:30, it would have really sucked, because they would have had to rerun a day's full of processing. Again, no data was lost because it was sitting on a powered off VM in another location. It just wasn't available at that time. But that's what led us to getting CDP with Veeam, is to eliminate that pause. So if we fail at 4:30 today, we can go back to 4:29, right? It does. Yes, it's all in there. Actually, I can't go to 4:29. I think we got it down. The lowest we could get it without getting SLA warnings was about 7 minutes, which still makes our DBA and everybody happy, right? 7 minutes instead of 7 hours. They're pretty happy with that. Any other questions? All right. Good 24 minutes. So remember, please take your survey. Here's some information. I did start a blog a little while ago. I talk about this a little bit. I'm going to try to keep updating it. Random stuff, all pertaining to this, pertaining to VMUG. This is my X or Twitter, my email, my LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out. Feel free to talk to me after this if you want. I'm always available, and I'm always interested in discussing more about this, because it really hits home. I'm passionate about improving our environment and making things much easier. Hopefully this never happens again, but unfortunately it's probably going to happen to me again, and probably happen to you. And all you can do is plan the best you can and make it as easy on yourself and your team and your coworkers as possible. So enjoy the rest of Explore, and thank you very much. Thanks. All right. I'll see you in a little bit. Oh.